The Boston Celtics have made a surprising move, and it involves someone in their front office as Wyc Grousbeck, and this Celtics sale is coming to finalization, and new details keep emerging on this situation revolving around him and Bill Chisholm. So we're going to dive in and explore the latest on these updates and what they really entail for the Boston Celtics future and direction, as obviously this sale is a big part of this off season, even if it hasn't been finalized or been talked about much as the moves. So we're going to dive in and explore all of this on this latest episode of Celtics Digest. I'm your host, Bruce Velez, with my co-host, Patrick Billings. And Pat, a little bit of interesting news to kind of dive in and discuss. Obviously, nothing core with the Celtics team roster, but stuff still resonating around the Celtics as well.
Yeah, it was kind of confusing news off the
Mm-hmm.
rip when we first saw this come about because we thought he was going to be sticking around for a little bit longer, but with all the NBA's new rules, that doesn't look like that's happening.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. And we'll get into all those rules and kind of specify why this transition is happening this way. So let's dive into it, Patrick. Make sure to grab your snack and stay tuned as Patrick and I will be live here at 6 p.m. Eastern to go over some Celtics news and looking at some Celtics roster stuff in our latest live stream. But Patrick, let's dive into this. And I think this makes sense, right? When hearing the reports and seeing all this news, like you mentioned, we did expect Guy and Wyc Grousbeck to be alongside the Boston Celtics a little bit longer. But with this latest update, it makes sense on why this could happen. Ramona Shelburne and Shams Charania from ESPN had this yesterday. We weren't available to take it, but we got it today talking about Wyc Grousbeck as he will no longer stay on as governor as part of the Celtics' $6.1 billion sale to Bill Chisholm. Plan had been for Grousbeck to remain through the 2028 season, like you had mentioned earlier, where Chisholm assumes the governor title, and the transfer will be finalized soon. We have this update from this little screenshot from Ramona Shelburne from an ESPN article. And she then further bases it saying, according to multiple league sources, while Bill Chisholm will technically be the Celtics governor, he and Wyc Grousbeck plan to run this team together as originally planned, with Chisholm as the governor and Grousbeck as an alternate governor and CEO. The change in structure was due to league rules, including minimum ownership, sources said. Grousbeck will end up owning slightly less than the required 15% given final funding of this transaction, where operations of this team should remain consistent with Brad Stevens and Rich Gotham. Basically, what we're saying here, Patrick, is that obviously Wyc Grousbeck would still like to have control over this team, but isn't going to have majority control of that team. We do know the Celtics, his father, Mr. Grousbeck, is one of the majority owners in that kind of pool of other owners here, and they're going to be selling that 15% majority stake to Bill Chisholm here, where obviously a guy in Grousbeck is going to be taking that step back. It's a little bit similar to the Mark Cuban situation, and I think we can kind of link it to this, where both said during the sale of their team that they would stay on to help their transition into new ownership, but both stayed on then less than a year, with the Celtics obviously getting closer and closer to this finalization. New updates are coming through, and it does seem like that the final one coming through today, through so far, is that Grousbeck will have a lesser role with this Celtics front office.
Yeah, I think the whole idea with this thing too is that Bill Chisholm wanted Wyc Grousbeck to still stick around because he's a Celtics fan himself, grew up a
Yep.
Celtics fan, loves this team, and wants the best thing for this team. And keeping Wyc around was definitely the number one thing for Bill, especially making the transition easier for him. Someone that hasn't owned a team before, and just really, kind of giving him the amount of years that he wanted just so that he could be smooth into the full transition. But now it's just a little bit quicker than was thought. But just with the NBA rules and everything going on, clearly that's a past thought now. But I think that Wick is still going to have a decent amount of somewhat control. I think that Bill's going to go off of a lot of his word because he respects him. Seems like when they were courtside, looks like they could be some good friends. Of just doing a little bit of an eye test for what their friendship looks like as of right now. But I truly think even though the number might be a little bit less of what the ownership is with the 15%, I still think it's going to be more valuable than what the percent shows just because of how much Wick means to Bill and how much the Celtics also means to Bill as well.
And you mentioned that he's a huge Celtics fan, and that kind of correlates with this here from the Celtics Files, where John Corrales, host of Locked On Celtics, obviously a Celtics beat writer, had a little bit more detail and a little bit more of an explanation and broke it down here in the latest episode of Locked On Celtics. So I'd advise you guys to check out this clip. If not, check out the full episode because John did a fantastic job. And he kind of alluded to what you said, Patrick. Obviously, Chisholm kind of coming in, being the Celtics fan, maybe didn't have that $6 billion up front, as we know from the sale being delayed a little bit throughout this process. And with doing that, obviously he still wanted to own this team. We mentioned Wyc Grousbeck, still wants to be a part of this team. And even though his father is selling it, it does seem like John was saying that Wyc off his inference, most likely would want to stay. So kind of finding a guy that, can get the money for his dad, but also give him some ownership and still allow him to have his job that he still does like would be the best of both worlds. But unfortunately for Wyc Grousbeck, it doesn't seem like maybe that's going to be the case here, as he will lose some of that percentage, maybe even lose some of that control, potentially even be pushed out of the situation, which makes sense, like to what I alluded to. Bill Chisholm kind of coming in, taking this new ownership, obviously wants to have his guys in the room, wants to have his representation, wants to have his final say, his final word, similar to how Wyc did with Brad Stevenson, making those moves to get Kristaps Porziņģis, to get Jrue Holiday. We'll have to see how that really does kind of come into play with Bill Chisholm here at the front of all of this now, kind of leading that charge and for the Boston Celtics. But with all this news, it does seem that the sale will be getting closer and closer to be getting finished, Patrick. With all these latest updates and stuff like that, we could see this done within the next week or so, which will be good for the Boston Celtics to finally get this sale done, to get the $6 billion to these franchises, and to progress this little bit of expansion a little bit sooner. We saw the Lakers get sold this summer. We just recently saw the Portland Trailblazers get bought in today. So a lot of transactions are happening throughout the league in front offices, and the Celtics are not the only ones either this offseason.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see how Wyc is going to be involved over this time, and maybe he gets re-involved with a different position.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But I think that the whole transition of it being confusing and that could have Celtics fans worries is just because it's someone new coming in. It's been
Yep.
what, 20 some odd years now, Bruce, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that they don't really have too much trust in anybody yet, and that's why it's always worrisome because you see what the offseason was going to look like with everything going down. It's like now we have this new ownership coming in. There's going to be a lot of different changes, but I think the one thing that has to make you feel comfortable as a Celtics fan or a Boston, someone who lives in Boston, is just that you have somebody that respects Boston and respects the Celtics and grew up a fan, and he's going to want to do what's best for the team at the end of the day. So I think you just got to stay comfortable and just stay with what Bill Chisholm has for the future for the Celtics, because he definitely wants to do it correctly. And that's why he wanted Wyc to be around for so long, because he knows how much pressure can be on this and what it means to him and what it means to the city of Boston. So we just got to stay comfortable with what Bill Chisholm has ahead of him. And who knows what's going to be in the next coming days with any statements from either the Celtics or from Wyc.
Yeah, I like those points that you made. Obviously, got to keep a note on what happens from the Celtics, what happens from that statement, but also talking about Bill Chisholm and how he wants to, do the Celtics fans right. Obviously, being a Celtics fan, growing up, and being someone growing up watching this team. And I do think we're going to see that transition kind of come into play. Like you mentioned, a lot of people were skeptical with the Celtics making these big time moves, with a new owner kind of want to go and shake up and ruffle even some more feathers. Certainly, we have not seen that with any, Jaylen Brown, Derrick White kind of moves so far. So I think we can kind of be a little bit reserved with that and feel patient with Bill Chisholm and how he's going to construct this team and kind of build it to that next championship contender. Hopefully around Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derrick White, and this new Eastern juggernaut after this season, like we've mentioned. But Patrick, some details revolving around that. Wanted to get that out to you guys. So let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section on the latest with the Bill Chisholm signing and what you guys think this really means for the Boston Celtics. Like Patrick and I did say earlier, we'll be live later today going over the Celtics. They released some of their games. We did see a little bit of an inkling with that, and we do see their cup games as well. So some news with that we'll have for you guys later. So if you want to come in, ask questions about the Celtics, make sure to tune in at 6 Eastern. Patrick and I will dive in and go to that. If you missed it, no worries. You can check out the VOD over on YouTube. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in and being here in this latest episode here on Celtics Digest. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, and go Boston Celtics.